My name is Diane Duke, and I am the CEO for the Free Speech Coalition. It's the trade association for the adult entertainment and pleasure products industry in the United States. So I'm honored to be asked to be here and to be leading this distinguished panel. I want to thank Alec Helmy and XBiz for hosting this event. It was interesting how it all came together. Jerry Barnett and Ben Yates over there, and I started a conversation online talking about the great opportunity that we had when we were all being here in the United Kingdom together at a time of great interest for you, where these issues of possible censorship are arising and regulation are arising. From the United States, I've learned a lot about government regulation. We have a great deal of it. We have a great deal of it's done a little bit differently there. There's a lot of fear-mongering there and a lot of opposition, so we're much louder in the United States. You guys are much more dignified than we are. So, and then today's, I don't know, for any of you who were at the 1 o'clock panel today, it was an excellent panel, and it was really interesting to have a discussion. So I'm excited about continuing that discussion and getting industry input on age verification and regulation and what that means for the industry here in the UK and for the industry around the world. When we're looking at our platform, we know that the borders are not as clear when you get on the internet as they are when you're on the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and start. And as I said, Jerry Barnett was one of the instigators of this discussion, this rally, and he's unfortunately could not be here. Jerry is a key component of this and a key component of fighting for your rights here in the United Kingdom. He's co-founded UK's Adult Industry Trade Association. Unfortunately, that has recently folded, but he is the founding effort behind the sex and censorship movement. And so Jerry, because he couldn't be here today, I did ask him if he would put together a video to just introduce the issue and get us started. So if we can get the video started.
Hello XBiz. I'd like to first of all say thank you to XBiz for hosting this event and for allowing me to speak even though I couldn't actually be at the event. I've recently set up the Sex and Censorship campaign. My name's Jerry Barnett and some of you may know me. I used to run a large adult site called Strictly Broadband. The UK over the past 30 years or so has become one of the most censored countries in the democratic world, and most British people don't realise that, but we have some of the strongest censorship of video in the world, and we have some of the strongest censorship of TV, especially when it comes to sexual expression. When the internet came along in the 1990s, it provided a free speech area and a free field for sexual expression in the UK for the first time. And it was natural that the authorities would respond and would try and take back control. And that's what they're doing now. Last year, the regulator Acworth began to drive UK adult websites out of the UK, including my own. And this year we've had a far more serious announcement, the announcement of a national internet filtering system to be run by ISPs. And I feel that this is the first step towards full internet censorship in the UK. I was very concerned that there was very little opposition to it, and so I set up the Sex and Censorship campaign. Now the filtering announcement, the filter is optional. It will allow householders to opt in or out, and it's going to block not just porn but all sorts of sexual and other content that the government considers unacceptable for children. Now, because it's optional, some people don't think that it's censorship, but it's only optional if you are the bill payer and if you're the householder. So a lot of people are going to lose access to content, whether they like it or not. The filter is also sold as a child protection mechanism, and yet it doesn't protect children. We already have parental control systems in this country, and so why do we need another one? It doesn't make sense. I'm a parent and I want to watch porn at home, and it appears that the government is advising parents that they can no longer look at porn or other adult material. So that, as a child protection mechanism, it makes no sense. As I say, the filter is really the UK's first step into censorship, and you can bet that once it's implemented, it will be strengthened and it will grow in scope. It's a very worrying step. Not only that, but once other countries see the filter in action, then they too will start looking at implementing their own filtering. So the UK is really breaking ground for censorship across the democratic world. At the same time, we have Christian and feminist groups gaining in strength, gaining more and more media attention, and gaining large amounts of funding and campaigning against sexual expression in many forms, not just pornography. We have groups trying to link pornography to rape, even though they have no evidence that that's the case, but they're creating a moral panic, and their panic is gaining ground, and at the same time we have no voice in the media opposing them. So that's why I set up the Sex and Censorship campaign. The campaign is set up to campaign for free speech and sexual freedom in the UK, and I think it fills an important gap. We don't have such a campaign at the moment. The campaign will do two main things. It will provide a voice in the media, a sex-positive voice that fights for sexual freedom, that supports free speech, and that opposes any step towards censorship of the internet. And secondly, we need a body that will actually talk to politicians and explain our points of view and counter the fundamentalists who are spreading lies about sexual expression and its effects on society. So again, I'd like to thank XBiz for supporting. I'd like to call on everyone here to offer your support to the campaign. So far it's been me working on my own. I now need support from the adult industry and from the wider public. So please follow on Facebook as Sex and Censorship, follow on Twitter. The Twitter ID is Porn Panic. And also we'll be announcing events and fundraisers coming up soon. So please join and watch the campaign grow before it's too late and before we lose free speech on the internet in the UK. Thank you very much.
Jerry spoke a little bit about fear and fear-mongering that goes on before these types of regulations go out. I know from the United States, we've seen a lot of that. That's happened in our industry very recently around 3 performers that just tested HIV positive, and just the massive amount of fear-mongering that went around that. We also have, child pornography is something that they always bring up and paint our entire industry as child pornographers. And we all know that we are the ones that are most effective at keeping underage people out of our productions. We also know that we can create the kinds of regulations to be most effective. We know how to do that within our industry, so it's important that we have a place at the table. Jerry spoke about Christians and feminists organizing against us. I'm a Christian and I'm a feminist, so it's not a mutually exclusive thing. I think it's important that we all speak up and for who we are and speak up about what our beliefs are. I think as we go forward, speaking of feminists and powerful women, I want to introduce our next speaker, Karina Curie. Karina is a performer and writer of the adult arts with Paul Raymond Publishing. She has been in the industry since 1999 and with a broad range of experiences including model, writer, performer, talent scout, agent, manager, and mentor. Karina is going to speak about porn and censorship. So, come on.
Thank you, Diana. I've been part of the industry since 1999 and have seen many changes throughout the industry. One of the many changes that I've seen are the censorship, the explosion of the internet, and the variety of porn that's available to everyone out there. Now, one of the main things that's actually really, really important to remember is that porn has been around since cavemen. We have depicted pornographic images on cave walls. We have depicted pornographic images throughout the history of man because it is a natural part of human expression. It's the most natural thing we can do as human beings. Just recently in the European Union, there was the politician Kartika Tamara Leotard, Dutch MP who was Socialist Party, wanted to have a blanket ban on all internet porn. Thankfully, this did not happen. But that was more to do with the fact that we are degrading women. Now, I am a feminist myself, but I don't see it as degrading as a woman to be in part of porn. I see it as actually very, very empowering. It's degrading as a woman to be desexualized. Sex is part of a primordial drive within all of us to actually procreate. Procreation is a drive in all of us. Otherwise, we'd have, obviously, no people to carry on. So if you look at it this way, sex being a natural thing, we depict it, we put it down, we teach everyone about it. Children need to be taught it at a much younger age within their households, within schools. Otherwise they will seek for it, they will search it out. Now we have information overload, we're giving children smartphones, we're giving children a lot more access to technology than maybe some of them should actually be allowed to have. At the age of 13 years old, most kids now have an iPhone or a smartphone. The ability to search this out is then part of the parents' problem. Is it a problem? I don't think so. Maybe some of the actual content being shot could be seen as possibly a problem, but education is key. If you educate your child to have self-respect, you educate your child to only know what they want to do and not what they feel obliged to do, then maybe they'll have a better interpretation of what they're seeing that's available out there. Information overload is part of the problem, but then it's down to us to filter this and to find out what we like as human beings. To ban it completely would be to take away freedom of speech, freedom of access to information, and it's down to the human being to not be mollycoddled, to not be nannied, and not to be told what they can and cannot do. But unfortunately, society, we become sheep. We become people who need to be told what to do. A person is smart, people seem to be stupid. No offence, but every single one of you on a one-to-one basis will have a different view than if all of you together would all stand up and say the same thing as one person they feel is stronger than them possibly is going to say. It's quite sad and unfortunate that this has happened. It's quite sad and unfortunate that children are not being educated in their homes. They need to be told that sex is a very natural and a very, very essential part of being a human being. Now, one thing I do campaign about is for performers to be educated a lot more, to be told about the detrimental effects that a job can have, whatever job it is, whether it's in the sex industry, excuse me, or whether it's in accountancy, whether it's whatever job there is, there's going to be some sort of dangers that are involved. Excuse me. I try, and I'm still going to try, to forefront the persuasion, if you will, of girls that are coming within the industry to be much more stronger. Thank you very much. To do what they want to do and only what they want to do, so we have a more naturalistic, depiction of porn, rather than some of the stuff that's out there where you see people that do feel uncomfortable. If they look uncomfortable, I don't personally get off on it, but I love porn. I've been watching porn since I was a young girl, finding it in bushes, stealing it from underneath my parents' beds, wherever it may be. Most of you do it. Most people that have a bugbear about it or a chip on their shoulder, probably deep down inside, do actually enjoy it. But he who doth protest too much, I do say. And that's for me. Thank you very much.
As I mentioned before, one of the other people who organized today's rally was Ben Yates. Ben is a producer, UK-based content producer, digital designer, and founder of Pervians Media. He was formerly the webmaster of MyBeautifulTees.com, an adult pay site which was closed due to not being able to comply with ATVOD rules and regulations. He has dealt with ATVOD both in person and online on a number of occasions, and will speak about ATVOD's attack on the adult industry. Without further ado, Ben.
Thank you. So basically, I'm here to talk about Acworth, the the authority for video on demand websites and content on the internet. Much like Ofcom, they've got a remit to police and regulate the video on demand content available on the internet. They came in as part of an EU directive back in 2009 and kind of found their feet through 2010 and now begin heavily regulating the industry in the UK. Their remit is very clear: to protect children from accessing online content on the internet. My view differs from that because you cannot protect children from adult content on the internet. It's just not possible. You know, they will always find a way to get that content, whether it's through the internet or through other means. The responsibility, in my view, should lie first and foremost with the parent, and the UK government should be fully focusing their efforts on that. That being said, AVOD is here to stay, unfortunately. They are a regulatory body enshrined in legislation. They will not be going anywhere anytime soon, and we do have to do our best to engage with them, at least to a degree. I think as an industry in the UK, we need to come together and have one voice that takes on AVOD and the censorship ruling of the proposals put forth by David Cameron, and we don't have that in the UK. We're very siloed in our mentality and the way that we operate compared to the US and other markets out there. The idea of today, really, I felt, was Jerry wanted to get people together from the industry to get their views aired and have a Q&A, open discussion following on from the AVOD situation today, and kind of really answer some core questions about where do we see the industry going in the UK and where do we see our business going. My website closed, not because AVOD applied pressure for me to close, but I took the view that after speaking with AVOD in person and having a meeting with them, that I could no longer carry on the service as I intended. Therefore, I was forced to close. Not the only one. There's been a number of casualties in the adult marketplace: Beauty Box, Strictly Ballband, various Playboy UK. The list goes on. We heard the list this afternoon when AVOD was speaking. My concern for this is it feels very much like a two-pronged attack. We've got AVOD on one side that's been established since 2009, 2010. With a core message of protecting children, which everyone can feel some kind of degree of commitment to. But then we also have David Cameron's worrying ISP filter that was proposed just a couple of months back. Now, to me, that's a step too far. AVOD's one thing, and complying with AVOD and keeping stuff behind a paywall, that's one thing. But to say that everyone in the UK cannot access the content that they freely want to choose to watch is disgusting and should not be allowed to happen. So I do feel that there's two separate issues. There's AVOD, which is not strictly censorship, it's more regulation.
That's how we keep you on time.
Basically, AVOD is regulation of the industry, much like Ofcom's been doing for years, rather successfully with TV. But the censorship opens up a whole new possibility for government to control the whole internet, if you will. I mean, who says what content's acceptable? Who regulates the regulator? It's an impossible situation for me to think that any government, much less the tourists, get access to that kind of power in the UK. You cannot have someone setting the moral compass to what they might find acceptable and pleasing and enjoying. It saddens me that it's come to this in the UK on the basis that we are a free country. We can go and watch stuff on the internet. We have all this awesome technology, smartphones, Twitter, social media, and all that is under attack from the government with the censorship plan. But I think it's important to draw the distinction between AVOD and censorship very clearly, because AVOD is not censorship. AVOD is regulation, and we have a chance at shaping that policy by kind of opening up and engaging with them on that basis. I'm not saying we should roll over and take what AVOD say, but I'm saying there's a conversation to be had with them. But they've driven many of us out of business, and I think there's some scars there that need a lot of work to repair. Thank you. That's me.
It was very interesting what you were saying, Ben, about us speaking with one voice. And the thing that's wonderful about our industry is the thing that also makes it very difficult. There's a great deal of independence of thought within each and every producer. we can come together on a lot of issues, but if you ask an opinion of any content provider or any adult industry member on an issue, you'll probably get a million different opinions. But I think this kind of a discussion, and as Ben was saying, coming together with one voice, it's much more preferable for our voice to come to AdVod with a reasoned approach to age verification and protecting children than to have that hoisted down from the government. We're the ones who are experiencing, we have the experience in this industry, we know how to move forward. So I really agree with everything that you said, Ben. One of the people that I have a tremendous amount of respect for in the United States, a producer, is Peter Acworth. He is the founder and CEO of kink.com. He's from the United Kingdom, and when David Cameron came up with his idea about filtering the ISPs, Peter wrote an open letter to Cameron about his what his thoughts were on the subject. We asked Peter if he would be able to be here. He wasn't able, unfortunately, to be here today, but he did create a video, and you're good. And so, without further ado, Peter Acworth produced this video for us to watch today.
My name is Peter Acworth. I'm the CEO of kink.com here in San Francisco. I'm a British national, grew up in England, went to university in England, went to university then in France, and then left, came to the States, and now run kink.com. I've got a message to David Cameron and indeed the people of England that I think that this war on pornography is a big mistake. It seems like a step backwards. I mean, it seems like England is going the way of a country like China with this ridiculous censorship, and I just don't see any rhyme or reason to it. How does one go about defining what pornography is? I mean, pornography might be difficult for me to say that what I do isn't pornography, but in the middle ground, there's all those educational sites that have graphics about teaching people on sexual education or teaching people about sexual disease. How does one determine where pornography stops and educational material starts? It strikes me as an extremely problematic law to put in place. So you're telling me if I go to a library in England, I'm not going to be able to look at sex educational websites because they'll potentially be filtered out. That seems to me to be denying the British people of information that they need to have. So the first prong, as I understand it, is to work with companies such as Google to remove child pornography, which I think is a noble cause. I think Google is already working very, very hard to do that, and great. The second prong is, as I understand it again, to make certain forms of pornography previously legal, to make them illegal, not just to sell, but to possess. Simply the act of taking that photograph, it's illegal by the virtue of the fact that that photograph is now on my camera. That seems to me to be very, very, very backward and very problematic law. The third prong of the war on pornography, as I understand it, is by default for ISPs to block out pornography so that customers in the United Kingdom will have to ask to receive pornography. And that strikes me also as extremely backward, and I don't understand ultimately the rationale behind that. If parents want to block pornography from their children, then they can opt not to receive it. Why should the rest of us have to live with not being able to receive what we want to receive when we're on Wi-Fi elsewhere? And the fact of the matter is, back when I was a child, back in the 70s, pornography was basically unavailable. As a child, it really never saw any pornography. And over the subsequent years, the internet came around in the sort of 80s, 90s to the present day today. The availability of pornography has rocketed. I mean, it's everywhere. It's just known that it's out there. It's consumable. And the consumption of pornography has gone up enormously. If it were true to say that pornography caused heinous crimes, one would think that heinous crimes would have skyrocketed in direct proportion. That is not the case. During this period when the proliferation of pornography on the internet, the incidence of rape, heinous crimes such as rape, has actually plummeted. It's gone down enormously during that same period. And so, if anything, there's a correlation in the other direction. So, the basis for this ridiculous war on pornography is evidence which is fundamentally flawed, in my opinion. There's a great research out there. There's a brilliant paper written by a professor at Northwestern University. It's entitled Porn Up, Rape Down. In my experience, in my personal experience, I was very confused about my own sexuality. I had desires to be tied up. I had desires to tie other people up. I wanted to spank. I didn't know where these feelings were coming from. I was very confused about my sexuality. At the age of 18, I found in seedy London sex shops bondage magazines. And for the first time I realized, wow, this can be done consensually. This is a consensual act that I can do with other people. And having found that material, which by the way was sold illegally, because such material is illegal at the time, it was illegal at the time and still is illegal for sex shops in London to sell because of the stupid laws in England. When I found this material, I then started to discover my own sexuality. I started to seek out other people. I started to talk about my sexuality. I became open about it. And it was a thoroughly healthy experience for me. You know, a friend of mine recently passed away, very sad, by the name of Jeff Gord, ran a similar operation to King.com up in Seattle, also an Englishman, also had the same story. It wasn't up until the point that he found pornography that did he really start to understand his sexuality. So it's not just me, there are a lot of people out there that being in an environment where they can see sexual expression alive on the internet is a healthy thing. It's a healthy thing for many, many people. You know, I'm willing to put it out there. If you have a society where sexuality is repressed, where people are not able to express their sexuality, where people are not able to find out about their sexuality, where people can't consume pornography at all, and are left wondering about their sexuality, you'll be left with a situation where people become isolated, people become frightened, people become scared, and those are the kinds of people that might commit crimes. So actually, in my opinion, it is healthy for society to openly discuss sexual matters and to put pornography out there for a basis for discussion. And that's exactly what we do here at King.com. We put, admittedly some fairly extreme material out there, BDSM acts, and there's a forum for discussion. We're a very community-based place where people can discuss their sexuality with us, and we think that is healthy. Obviously this is something I feel very, very strongly about. It's why I moved to America, partially why I'm still in America and running the business that I run here is because I feel like I feel a necessity to get the word out about that your sexuality is okay, and the internet is a perfect forum for that. So it's something I feel strongly about. If you feel strongly about this, as I do, I encourage you to put together a video such as the one I put together here. I encourage you to send it, put it on a blog, get as many people to see it as possible. Get your local MP to see it, send it to David Cameron himself, and basically lobby and get the word out there that this is a big, big mistake that the government in England is about to make.
I think Peter makes a number of good points there, and as a community, we create fantasy for people, and it's not shameful. It's actually something to be very, very proud of. And Peter, I think, was extremely articulate in how he spoke of that. And yes, incidents of rape have not been proven to go up, and actually, the reverse is true in this study and in many situations. So I think it's really important that we take a look at the facts. Before I worked for the Free Speech Coalition, I worked for Planned Parenthood. And we went on a study to Western European countries, and I remember, and this was during the time President Bush was in office, and I remember the head of one of the health divisions in France saying, because they had so much more success about teenage pregnancy, lower rates of teen STIs. And actually the teens in France initiated sexual behavior much later than the teens in the United States, where we have a... My time's up. I'm just going to speak loud so you guys can hear me. So when the health minister of France said, we use the best research out there when we make our policy decisions, and he said, where we get that research? From the United States. And then he looked at us kind of funny and said, you don't use your own research? And we were all very, very embarrassed, but this is the same kind of things that, as Peter described, is happening here. So I think it's really important that the level of panic, porn panic, as Jerry has, the level of panic is diminished. We are able to really have healthy, sensible discussions with ACVOD and hopefully with the government. So I think it's really important. This effort that you guys are doing is so very, very important. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker. Miles Jackman is a solicitor who specializes in defending clients accused of distributing or possessing extreme sexual content. In the recent past, he has won 2 high-profile, groundbreaking cases helping Michael Peacock defeat a charge of distributing obscene material and Simon Walsh on a charge of possessing extreme porn. Thank you for your efforts, Miles, and please come enlighten us.
Thanks. If the Hitachi dies, I've got quite a powerful voice record, so we'll see how I do. I'm really sorry, just briefly, I left a piece of paper on the chair for all of you because I don't want to bamboozle you with too much hard law, which does sound like a good production title for anyone who's into litigation. I have, as Diane said, represented a number of clients who've been prosecuted for both producing and distributing material, but perhaps most sadly, for actually being in possession of it. One of my clients, and for those of you who are not in this jurisdiction, may not have heard of the tiger porn defendant, who was in possession of what was told to be extreme pornographic material depicting bestiality of a woman having intercourse with a tiger. It got to court. It went to another court. It got to a hearing. The judge at that hearing asked the prosecution, the police's lawyers, to turn the volume up. It turned out it was a man wearing a tiger skin rug who turned to the camera and said, "That beats advertising Frosties for a living." In abstract, it's hilarious. It was on the front page of the Daily Telegraph. It's what they call a toast dropper because it's so funny. Except his life was ruined, because if you Google tiger porn, you will come up with his name. His life has been absolutely trounced through the mud as a consequence of this. Now, I am going to talk to you predominantly about industry-related publication offences, but I do want you all to think about your end consumers and the effect that this has upon them, the content which is produced and they consume. If I can just direct your attention to the first point on the sheet, the Obscene Publications Act, which is, as it says, a publication or distribution offence. I've left the guidelines there very briefly. Perhaps the most interesting point is that there are a number of activities there that are prohibited by law, which are legal to perform. You can do it, but you can't record it and then distribute it. So the two perhaps most notable are fisting and what is known as water sports or ignolia. I'm really glad I did Latin at school. Anyway, it is interesting to note that these activities are legal to do, yet nonetheless my defendants have gone to court for both producing and distributing this material. We had a very significant case last year, which was live tweeted as the obscenity trial, where a gentleman who happened to be a gay escort sold material 1-to-1, possibly the lowest level of distribution you could ever achieve. He got people to come to his flat, and then he would sell them videos or DVDs. He was arrested, he was tried, and he had the courage of his convictions to stand up against a suppressive, censorious regime, and he was acquitted by a jury. But not by Bill Gates. I'm reminded of South Park, and I want to fucking execute him. Can't we have a Mac in the room? Steve Jobs, where are you? And just more. I knew this was going to be work. Thank you very much. Can we have a drum roll and a snare as well? I thought I was doing the serious bit on law. Anyway, moving swiftly onwards. Also prosecuted was Simon Walsh, another gay man, but who happened to be both a barrister such as myself and a notable politician in London. He had produced snapshot photographs of himself engaged in sexual activity with other consenting adults in the privacy of his own home. The police found this material and he was prosecuted for being in possession of it. Again, it featured activities such as fisting and, in this case, urethral sounding. But nonetheless, these are activities which are legal to perform. He also had the courage of his convictions and fought this oppressive legislation, and he won. My argument is that obscenity juries in this country, being normal members of the public, 12 average people, are very much likely to be more literate than our legislators, because they understand that pornography exists, it's available if you want it, but as I was reminded of Salman Rushdie's quote about the satanic verses, that if a book offends you, just close it. Likewise, if you do not wish to see pornographic material, do not seek it out. He was not offended by that, and the jury quite clearly said fisting, water sports, urethral sounding and BDSM activities are not things that we as adults are bothered with. And both defendants were acquitted. My point is that the prosecution, the CPS, as you've heard possibly if you were in the meeting with ACVOD earlier, have not updated their guidelines. My argument is that there is a possibility for you all, as members of the industry, campaigners, activists, people who are interested in sexual representations and pornography, you have the possibility to challenge these oppressive laws. It is not impossible. I have 3 legal challenges which are likely to be revealed very, very soon, challenging guidelines, legislation, legality, and process. We need your support in doing this. Please, please, it is very important that we take on this censorious, anti-libertarian, anti-free speech, and anti-right for adults to enjoy pornography, should they choose to. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to go before Steve Jobs or anyone else interrupts my speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miles. That was great. Our next speaker is Edie Lamont. Edie is an erotic dancer. She works mainly in the traditional pubs, which have, which have a focus on stage performance. She danced full-time for 10 years in Shoreditch, mainly at Brown's and the White Horse, but now dances part-time. She considers her job to be performance and has done many other forms of performance, such as music and burlesque. She became engaged in the anti-censorship campaign after Hackney Council tried to introduce a nil policy in order to close down all strip venues and sex shops in the Sandwich area. Along with the rest of the dancers, she spoke at events, wrote articles, and spoke to MPs and councillors. Eventually, a compromise was reached, and with the prohibitionists, and they agreed to leave 4 remaining clubs open with a ban on any further SEV, sex encounter venues, licenses being issued. Wow, you have a lot to be proud of. That's excellent. This is what we're talking about, folks, coming together and really having a voice. So Edie, without further ado. Thank you.
There is a moral panic in this country right now about sexualization, pornification and objectification that has reached a ridiculous level. It's at the something must be done, won't anyone please think of the children's stage that has our politicians rubbing their hands with glee, as they now can use it as an excuse to further censor us and the internet. There is a constant white noise of sex panic all around, encouraged by the press at both ends of the spectrum. The Guardian and the Daily Mail now feel like one and the same. The left cheek and the right cheek of the same farty, whiny arse. But the other protagonists of this sorry state of affairs are the extremist lobby groups, namely Object and UK Feminista. These so-called feminists now run summer schools in universities, advising students on how to shut down their local lap dancing club, how to ban lads mags, how to ban page 3, ban porn, and how to attack all the erotic industries in general. Their main problem being they confuse sexuality with misogyny. These groups are confused bullies who have far too much airtime and must be challenged. Their arguments dominate the media and the policies being made by our politicians as a result. So just a handful of fanatics have the ear of the MPs, and news groups pretty much act as their own press department. There is nothing inherently wrong with consenting adults enjoying sex and their own sexual selves. There is nothing wrong with watching a sexy dance, or a bit of porn, or appreciating a good body, masculine or feminine. People should not be made to feel guilty about this. They cry exploitation due to it being a business, and yes, in the erotic industries we want to make money, but this is the same with any other industry. They say to us, you buy a woman's body like you buy a cappuccino. No, you pay to watch my performance, as if you went to a theatre show or a cinema, same kind of thing. The first time I ever encountered the lobby group Object was about a decade ago when they staged a small protest outside of Brown's in Shoreditch, the strip club I was working in at the time. Ironically, they gathered around shouting their crazy nonsense when the venue was being used for a private party by our very butch, gay Australian bar manager. On the stage that night, there were lots of hot Brazilian male strippers. So there were a handful of these women outside yelling with their banners, going, "Object to the objectification of women, oh my God!" Whilst the male strippers got naked on the stage, and all the women cheered. We thought nothing more of this for years, assuming nobody would be taken in by such nonsense, but extremists are driven and persistent in that steely-eyed, fanatical and psychologically kind of disturbed way. So whilst we all got on with life, they carried on with their campaigns. Then in early 2009, I picked up a copy of the Times and began to browse and came across an article by the celebrity feminist, Caitlin Moran. It was a vicious rant against dancers and like a bitchy 14-year-old's diary entry. This shocker of an article alerted us all to the growing hate movement against the dancers and the beginnings of today's porn panic. We set up some Google alerts and then began to realise how big this movement was growing. These feminist journalists were far more derogatory to the women in our business than the worst stag party or football crowd I've ever encountered. The noise continued, and then in 2009 the Policing and Crime Bill was passed in Parliament, allowing councils to set nil policy, meaning absolutely no sex establishments in their boroughs, whether it be strip clubs or sex shops, gay or straight. Soon after this law was passed, Object began to harass councils to adopt a nil policy and close all SEVs. So the creeping censorship had begun, and I fear where this will lead. This drive towards banning all things sexual is craziness. They are only free because we are free. We exist on the outer parameters, and if we are all banned, the attack goes in onto the people in the inside. And they don't seem to realise that it will come and bite them on the arse at some point. The side effect of this policy is that it's been used to try and close gay and burlesque venues by religiously conservative councils. The same problems will occur with an internet filter. It will be misused. A fairly typical display of ignorance from these feminist groups is that they have no answer when you ask them about gay porn or male strippers. They haven't thought through the consequences of their actions, a lot of which are driven by anger and jealousy rather than rational thought and reality. So in 2010, Hackney Council decided to have a consultation about imposing a nil policy and therefore closing down all the family-run traditional East End strip clubs and Expectations, the gay sex shop. Is it working? They did not inform any of the businesses they were about to close that this was happening, but luckily Sue, the owner of the White Horse, came across this and spread it all over social media. Dancers, bar staff, bouncers, customers, DJs and allies were outraged, and we all got together to fight this nil policy. The dancers were the face of the campaign, as we knew we had to counter the narrative of poor helpless women being exploited by evil men. And they're evil and terrible. We even thought, oh, let's go speak to Object. They've misunderstood. Once we've spoken to them, everything will be all right. Such naivety, and we know better now. If a woman disagrees with the agendas of these extremist feminist groups, you are told you are suffering from Stockholm Syndrome and ignored. Ironically, no one objectifies us more than feminists. An interesting part of our campaign was the different reasons the dancers had for defending their industry. Some of the older South American and Eastern Bloc girls were shocked.
An Argentinian friend of mine said, "This is the mentality of dictatorship," and I know because I grew up in one. And it is the mentality of dictatorship. My reasons were twofold. One, because as a general performer, I have seen a wonderful amount of creativity amongst the dancers. From this free and open subculture, neo-burlesque and pole of dancing have emerged. And you have guerrilla technology attack. You have to let the subcultures exist because new arts, ideas and technology develop in the subcultures. Secondly, this is about freedom. We are not doing anything wrong, and if you're working in a legal licensed industry, then I don't need to tell you how many rules and regulations you need to comply to. It is not for a small group of control freaks to tell us what we can and can't do. During this campaign, I was sure it was the beginning, because these people won't stop. First strip clubs, but what next? And sure enough, they're now on to lose the lads mags, ban page 3, censor the internet, and even ban burlesque. Where does this end? Banning consenting adults from doing stuff does not work, and everyone in this business needs to unite and fight it. Feminism in general is being warped, hijacked in fact. What we are experiencing right now is not feminism. We are facing a counter-sexual revolution. We are facing Puritanism. And who really are these feminists? I consider my colleagues in the erotic industries to be positive feminists. The women I know who do porn, striptease, fetish work are all independent, open-minded, fun, witty, buy properties, put themselves through university and college. Surely this is feminist. They're confident in their own bodies, sexually free and open. It also always focuses on the women in the erotic industries. They have no reply when you ask them about gay porn or male performers. With this, they reinforce the patriarchal view that women are frail victims, unable to make decisions for themselves, and inherently frightened of sex. And this is really the problem that we face. A tiny but vocal minority are dictating to a fairly laid-back majority. A handful of extremists are constantly harassing our lawmakers, locally and nationally, to ban all the erotic industries. Object how we only have a small team who spend their entire day pestering the government to ban porn, censor the internet, outlaw striptease, ban burlesque, ban pole dancing, ban lads mags, ban page 3, ban Rihanna, ban Robin Thicke videos, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. They will not be happy until you're all trussed up like Victorians. So they have the press on their side, and we really must unite and fight them before it's too late. They also have the support of religious groups, mainly the CLC, which is the Christian Legal Centre, who have money and a legal team to back them up. And of course in boroughs like Tower Hamlets, the mosques are very much against any kind of industry like this. But the thing is, religion is going to have to live side by side with all kinds of people in a liberal secular democracy. And if they don't like it, it's too bad. It's also odd to watch these so-called feminists sharing a platform with the very kind of extreme religious right as well. Okay. And the final bit, let's get on to objectification of women. That ridiculous and patronising cry. Firstly, what the fuck is objectification really? This phrase always strikes me as an immature and one-dimensional, and betrays an extremely poor understanding of human nature. Yes, men look at women, and often in lust, but guess what? Women look at men look at men, women look at women, and yes, with lust and desire, because it's a major part of how we are, it's a major part of our makeup. And in all this, there is an assumption that people's characters are not visible. We all know that that we read people on many different levels in a split second. When you are face to face with another human being, this is an automatic process. It is also apparent on screen. Your character does not disappear. You cannot hide somebody's personality. In the context of my job, stripping, it shows a total lack of understanding about art, performance, context, and nuance. Everyone in the erotic industries must unite and fight this, whether you are hardcore porn or cupcake burlesque. We need to campaign for the UK equivalent of the First Amendment, and if we don't all fight this together, then the normal people out there, you're next.
it amazes me when I'm interviewed by the media, and the question about objectification of women comes up, and women as victims. And I realize that they have not taken the time to speak to any of the performers in this industry. And I remember when I first came into the industry from Planned Parenthood, I knew very, very little about. I mean, I had watched porn, but I didn't know about the industry of porn as much. And so I remember having lunch with Nina Hartley, and she told me the story of when she first saw adult content, and she was a virgin then, she hadn't had sex, but she watched this movie and she was there, and this is how she went. She goes, I want that, I want to do that, I want to be that. And she is very much that. She is a strong and powerful woman. And Karina and Edie, you are wonderful representatives of this industry. Thank you so much for standing up and for speaking out, because it's so important that people really see the women behind this industry. Working in Planned Parenthood, and I have fought for women's right to choose for almost my entire adult life, and I understand that a woman's right to choose does not end with whether or not to choose an abortion. It is extended to what she wants to do with her body. And you are so right in the fact that when these people interview me, they talk about women as victims, and they talk about women in the industry. And I say, okay, so let's take a look at the typical scene. You've got a man and a woman, and she gets paid more than he does. And his job is a little bit more difficult. We can fake it, guys. You can't. Well, women can never stand up to the looks, to the way that they look on the screen. Well, I was at a university and debating a feminist scholar, and so I said, show of hands, guys, how many of you guys know who Ron Jeremy is? And as soon as I said that, they all just kind of slunk down. So, let's be real. We create fantasy, and I think you guys have got an excellent group of people here to represent you. You've got an excellent start. So, do we have time for questions, or do we have time for questions or some discussion? I guess one of the issues that I want to just kind of throw out there, and we'll get to your question, is, we all want to. I'm a parent of 2 sons. Many of us are parents, grandparents. We all want to protect children. And putting tools in place to do so, to make sure that age-appropriate consumers are watching our content is a good thing. But does that need to come from the government? Is that something that can come from our industry? And do you think that there's a format out there that we can do that? So I guess, I want to kind of throw that out to the panel real quick and see what you guys think, and then we'll go to some questions.
I think personally, it's down to the parent to educate their child, and it's all done on a very individual basis of their child, because children are very sexual from a very young age, and people forget this. Parents try to wrap their children in cotton wool and say, oh, let's protect their innocence. Well, protecting their innocence is teaching them that this is a natural thing, and at an appropriate stage in their life, I've seen as young as sort of 10, 11 months old, little girls and little boys thrusting their hands between their legs and having a fiddle. When the parents smack their hands and say, don't do that, it's dirty, it makes me balk, because you're now imprinting that that's dirty. No, you say it's private time. You educate from a young age that sex is a very natural thing to do, but it should be a very one-to-one basis. It should be individualistic. You can't do a block of sex education at school for 15-year-old kids when they're already giving out blowjobs behind the bike shed at 12. It just doesn't work. You can't say, right, kids are ready at this age, when they're not. They're ready at so much younger, but you have to do it in a sensitive way. And each child is going to be different, so you have to approach it in a different manner. And it's down to parents to be educated that this is normal, and not to think that, oh my God, I'm going to instill on my child they're going to be a little pervert. No, your child is a human being. They're a mammal. They are driven to procreation. They will want to learn about this, and the younger they want to learn, then you need to instill in them in an appropriate way how to approach sex in a very socially acceptable manner.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I put all the responsibility basically on the parents. If you let the internet into your home, then you have the responsibility, in my view, to make sure that your children are accessing it responsibly and they have the education to put what they see on the internet in context. That goes for porn, but that also goes for social media and interaction with other people on the internet. It's not the responsibility of government to parent your children.
Yeah, don't use Facebook as a babysitter and all that kind of thing. Take their phones off them and send them to bed. Actually, this might be a little bit off topic, but in terms of porn and how porn can be kind of good and healthy, there's a really interesting agony aunt who's from New York, and she's got a YouTube channel. Her name is Rachel Rabbit White, and it's worth having a little search for her. And she actually uses porn to counsel people having relationship issues. And it's really interesting because she uses porn to kind of delve into their subconscious. And like she had somebody kind of email her saying, I came from quite a religious background, I don't really know about these kind of things, but my girlfriend's really into kind of rape porn and simulated rape, and I'm kind of freaked out and I don't know what to do. So she kind of counsels them and sort of analyses between them, what is it about a rape scene that your girlfriend is getting turned on by? Is it the kind of being completely, like somebody wants you so much that they're so consumed by desire for you? Is it that kind of being somebody's whole world? Or is it the kind of restraint thing? Is it feeling like somebody's masculinity on top of you, the sort of the dominating thing? And she kind of counsels them through this kind of, I don't know, kink desire that they have, and like gets them to do all these BDSM situations and says, now how did you like that? Was that like was that an 8 out of 10, or was that like a 4 out of 10? And kind of she uses porn as like an access to people's subconscious desires, and it's actually really positive and really healthy and really interesting. So Google her, it's quite fun.
Nice. I'd like to run two very quick points. First of all, Backlash, who are the sexual liberties organisation that I do pro bono work for, we always describe pornography as essentially the canary in the coal mine. For those of you who aren't from a mining culture, in other words, it's the first thing to die. And it is for tacit censorship. Now, the Open Rights Group, who are a British organisation, analysed the filtering plan, and they looked at it, and of course pornography was the top of the list on the child protection agenda. Then eating disorders. Anyone feel slightly uncomfortable that perhaps a child under the age of 18 who might have an eating disorder couldn't look at material that will assist counselling them, educating them about that? It goes on, and finally, esoteric material. I have no fucking idea what esoteric material is at law, but I figure the Onion's going to get, censored immediately for being too weird. Now, my second point is, this is deeply hypocritical, because David Cameron, our British Prime Minister, voted against teaching consent in schools about a month before he got on the adult industry's arse, if I can put it that way. In fact, he actively voted against a sex and relationship education bill that would have included active consent education in schools. So teaching younger women about sexual agency, autonomy, and the ability to negotiate consent. Yet he's prepared to prohibit that kind of activity within the adult industry. That seems deeply hypocritical to me.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. I'm with CAN, the Consenting Adult Action Network. One of my real concerns is that you've got an awful lot of friends here in this audience today. An awful lot of people here tonight agree with what you're saying. And how do we convey this message? How do we break through the brutality of our media here in the UK? We have got to do it. I've got some ideas, but I'd like to hear what the panel has to say about how to break through.
Well, I think it's through groups like Sex and Censorship, and obviously pooling the resources that we've got out there, such as the Open Rights Group and Backlash, joining forces with them, because it is a shared campaign. It's a shared fight in many ways. Restricting internet freedoms, obviously, forcing the Open Rights Group, and they've got a massive campaign that they're gearing up on blocked websites. Mainly, it started with mobile blocked websites, so you could report websites on a mobile network that were blocked incorrectly. Coincidentally, sexandcensorship.org is blocked and censored and restricted. But yeah, so you can put those through Open Rights Group now, but as I understand it, they're going to widen that up to internet and incorrectly blocked sites. Because make no mistake, when the government says they want to censor the internet and other content is used as a descriptor for what they're going to censor, they mean they're censoring everything they do not like. It opens the gates for them to do that, and we can let that happen. And you've got Facebook, you've got Twitter, and I think if we just come together through those various groups and act as adults, and which have that unified voice and come together and actually kind of shout at them as much as they shout at us.
It is really hard though, because when we did when the strippers tried to do the Hackney campaign, we were like, oh, well, we do a comments-free article in The Guardian. I mean, there's supposed to be like a liberal paper. Our mainstream media is on ideological lockdown, and that's a fact. It's only through independent sources, blogs, independent websites, campaigns like Sex and Censorship, which just gets censored all the time anyway, that we can actually spread this. And it is actually a really big uphill struggle, because there seems to be a cabal of like really twisted feminist journalists who there's not very many of them, but they really dominate everything, and it's all very negative and basically fear-mongering and scaremongering and teaching women how to be afraid of themselves and afraid of men, afraid of sexuality. And they really are on ideological lockdown, and it is an uphill struggle, and I really don't think there's an easy way to get around this apart from just keep doing things like this, keep getting as many people on side, keep writing articles, keep blogging.
Okay. You're brilliant, you're absolutely right. Everything you say is fantastic. Well, we need to find a way to break through.
I know. Does anyone have any ideas?
Sorry, I'm going to be slightly more positive than you do. For those of you who aren't British residents or have better things to be doing around 10:30 at night, there was a Newsnight debate very recently, which was predominantly balanced, which is more than can be said for usual representations on British television. It was supposed to be a whole special on our kind of flagship new serious worthy comment programme. There is in fact a contributor here tonight who performed exceptionally well. I don't want to embarrass them by mentioning them, but it was very interesting to see various areas of the adult industry given the space and time in broadcast media to just express themselves. So I think that we are reaching a really critical point, and I think that we're seeing a tipping. And as I said before, I think that the internet has a lot to do with that, and public attitudes towards pornography have changed enormously.
Okay, I think we're going to need to wrap up soon. Ben?
Sorry, excuse me. Can I make one point?
Oh, absolutely, Jamie.
Thank you very much. I think, personally, I found it quite frustrating to sit here and listen to some of what's been said, because I feel like we talk about fear-mongering, but we're actually creating our own fear-mongering ourselves amongst the industry. The issue here is child protection. Now, we can all sit here and say, well, it's a parent's responsibility. Sadly, a lot of parents aren't responsible. Your children go out of your house or in someone else's house if their children aren't responsible. We need to take some level of social responsibility for preventing children accessing pornography. Then, when it is secure and children can't access it, we can all sit here and protect our rights to freedom of expression. However, we're getting off subject. We're missing the point. We really, as an industry, need to solve the problem. The problem is children accessing pornography. We, as an industry, come up with a solution, and then we can sit here and till the cows come home and protect our civil liberties. But it's quite frustrating because I think we're all going off subject. All we're talking about is protection of this, and this is happening. Oh, they want to block this next, and next you're going to do this, or you won't even be able to read the paper. It's crazy. AppVod just want, there's a clear situation that needs to be dealt with. Why don't we as an industry get together, come up with a solution, and deal with the problem?
One of the things that Ben was saying in his talk earlier was that coming together and having a conversation with AppVod is a critical piece to this. And I think getting a voice together that is a comprehensive and reasonable voice. The thing is, the breaking the myths. I mean, I think a lot of what we saw tonight, and we are preaching to the choir pretty much, is breaking the stereotypes and the myths, and acknowledging the barriers that are out there for us. Barriers like the media, that may be more one-sided than not. But when you have people like the panel that we have up here speaking and talking and letting people know of the dangers that are there, I think there will be more pressure on AppVod to listen to the adult voices. One of the things that happened today when we were talking about at the 1 o'clock session with Pete Johnson was the acknowledgement that the adult representative on their board was dropped off. So, and when asked what is the number one priority for AppVod, it was child protection. So child protection is the number one priority. Regulating the industry is a big piece of that, but there's nobody there from the industry. So by having a reasonable and sound voice about how the industry is concerned about child protection, coming together with the groups that we have to work with, and coming together with a reasonable proposal. That proposal coming from the industry. I'm dealing with, in the United States, a mandatory condom regulation that they're trying to hoist upon us. We as an industry have come together with really solid self-regulation that has worked well for us. And because we were the ones who came forward with it, because we identified an issue that was important for us to approach and to deal with. And so that is what we're all facing here tonight. And I think the conversation is a good one. I think it has just begun. So if you have not given your information to Jacqueline, she's right over there, please do so, because this conversation needs to continue. This is a critical subject, and you've got a great group working on this. I am honored to be here tonight. Thank you so much for allowing me to present this panel and to be part of this. Thank you all.